Before we start, just want to say that I hope you're all doing well during this challenging time, and been busy in my home office and seeing people long distance, as well as many other activities, of course, around the home and family. And today I'm going to be talking about something that I knew about for quite a long time, but was recently reminded by a family member about the importance of this as it started to get more prevalence and started to be studied more, and that is the vagus nerve. So I'm going to be talking about why the vagus nerve is important for health in this lecture, and then in the next lecture next month I'll be talking about things to do to help to heal and improve the vagus nerve. And at 2 o'clock I'll be doing a question and answer period, so we're going to be doing this for a half hour, the presentation, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. So if you wanted to ask some questions, just please jot some things down if you would like. And then we can talk about them at 2 o'clock. So I want to give a little bit of background about my understanding of the vagus nerve and how I came to first learn about this many years ago. Many years ago I started to teach classes in my classes at the Cushing Institute, where I taught for many years. Okay, I hope you can hear me now. Somehow got muted by mistake, and so can everybody hear me now? That's okay to do that? Yes, okay, good. So as I was saying, many years ago I started teaching about the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is one of the greatest examples of the balancing of yin and yang in the body. And because it has these two branches, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And the balance of these two branches of the autonomic nervous system, autonomic really means automatic. They're basically operating all the time without us thinking about it to keep us healthy. And the significance is that the sympathetic nervous system, when it's in balance, it's using up energy and using up nutrition. So the sympathetic nervous system is more active at night. And the parasympathetic nervous system is more active when we're sleeping, and when that's functioning, basically the body rebuilds itself and it regenerates. The problem today that many years ago I first discovered when I was teaching this is that the sympathetic nervous system is overactive in people in modern society, because when the body's under stress, either by diet or lifestyle or many other factors, environmental factors, then what happens is the body will overactivate the sympathetic nervous system, and the parasympathetic, the healing system in our body, becomes underactive. And this eventually will cause disease from stress. The vagus nerve is a part of this, and we'll be talking about this, I'll be talking about this today. My first understanding of the vagus nerve was from many years ago when I first learned about it from one of my Qigong instructors. Qigong is a healing exercise that works very much with the parasympathetic nervous system. And as we'll be talking about today, the parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve are closely connected to each other. They are actually, the vagus nerve is part of the sympathetic nervous system. Part of the parasympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. And so one of my Qigong teachers, instructors, he felt that the Qigong, which has been, this healing exercise from China, has been renowned for healing a variety of illnesses. He felt that his kind of Qigong that he was teaching was particularly working because it was operating by stimulating the vagus nerve. And so many people who've learned about the vagus nerve will, when we talk about this next month, think that there's only a few ways to stimulate the vagus nerve, but many kinds of practices that stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system also stimulate the vagus nerve. We'll be talking about that next month, and including things that get you out of stress. So in order to understand the vagus nerve, I just want to introduce this idea about the myth of modern medicine. The allopathic model of healthcare operates under the paradigm that believes the body makes mistakes and that the body does not know how to self-regulate. And because of this, then medicine uses all kinds of heroic measures, whether it be from a vaccine or whether it be from a chemotherapy drug or a surgical intervention to attempt to help to heal or recover health. But this myth has been promoted by medicine through marketing mostly, and millions of people have been duped into taking prescription medicines, operating on their body, poisoning their mindset even, because they feel that the body can't heal itself. It can't self-regulate. And this is a myth. The understanding of self-regulation has been the basic premise of all these healing arts throughout the world, in Asia and Europe, before the advent of allopathic medicine. And if this needs to change in the function in order for allopathic medicine to be more effective, as it's not effective in most of the chronic illnesses that we face. So this results in skyrocketing costs because we use very expensive interventions, increased dependency on drugs that have incredible side effects mentally and physically, and many failed outcomes as medicine is not terribly effective for the chronic diseases we face, such as diabetes and cancer and heart disease and arthritis, and the list can go on for a long, long time. So the patient's body in medicine is not viewed as a partner on the healing journey, but instead a cause of illness in the first place. But nothing could really be farther from the truth. True longevity of macrobiotic medicine and the macrobiotic model of healing is based on a different view, which we may call vitalistic or energetic. And although pure materialistic scientists will say that we only can depend on things that can be measured, of course we have to understand that we have to make sure that we measure them correctly, which I think today is a problem. But also, if you ask that materialistic scientist or doctor that we only can depend on things measurement, then if they ask that doctor or scientist how much do they love their wife, they might say 18%, 20%, 80%, 90%, but it can't be measured. So vitalistic, energetic models can't be measured, but they can be felt. And this is something that we'll be talking about because all parts of the body are required in the vitalistic or energetic approach, and your body can self-regulate. In the last 40 years, I've worked with a lot of people who've proven that this is so, that the body can self-regulate if you take the right steps. So human beings have an innate healing potential if we abide by the laws of nature, especially in our daily life. And the body has a wisdom. And to illustrate this, we can talk about as an introduction to the vagus nerve, we can talk about how your body is doing things unconsciously, regulating your body to keep yourself healthy, keep yourself alive every day. So for instance, your heart will beat 100,000 times daily. You'll take 23,000 breaths. Your blood will circulate 3 times a minute through the body. Your liver will continuously cleanse and detoxify the body. And the bacteria in your gut is working with your digestive tract to break down your food, absorb your nutrients, and actually communicate with the rest of the body also, and the mind. And this works by the system that I mentioned before, the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system has many parts, but this body survival through the autonomic nervous system is designed to work without. So the autonomic nervous system is working to ensure, without our thinking about it, our survival, which you might say our health, our continuation. And the brainstem is the thickest and highest point of the spinal cord. Within the brainstem, we have information control centers, which send out signals. And some of these systems alert us to stressors from the environment. So we're constantly interacting with the environment. And whether this is due to some kind of something that enters our body, some stressful thoughts, or a tiger, or a wolf in front of us, we are automatically control. The system allows us to survive through the correct stress response. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for this stress response. So under stress, we increase our heart rate, we increase our breath rate, we decrease the depth of our breath, so we have more shallow breathing. We get the blood flowing through our arms, to our arms and our legs for fight or flight, away from the liver, digestive tract, and it enables us to basically deal with the stress. In contrast, the other system in our body, now this, of course, just living, we put out energy, as I mentioned earlier, too. So in contrast, the autonomic nervous system allows us to react and recover from the rigors of the tasks of the day by stimulating the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system. Remains us to be calm, decrease our heart rate, decrease our breath, get the blood towards our internal organs, let our body recover, and as I mentioned before, and procreate, and or feel like procreating, for sex and libido. It's all related to the parasympathetic nervous system. And this basically is very active at night when we're sleeping, but also is always operating in the day. So when the vast majority of the controls of the parasympathetic nervous system run through these nerves, these pair of nerves that usually we just call the vagus nerve, but there's actually a pair of nerves. And this runs through basically the control of the parasympathetic. So the vast majority of the controls asserted by the parasympathetic nervous system is through the vagus nerve. And this is the only nerve that originates from the brain stem and runs through the whole body. The vagus nerves, there's two, but we'll just call it one for now. These are paired structures with one present on each side of the body and responsible for regulating the control of the heart, the lungs, the muscles of the throat and airway, the liver, the stomach, the pancreas, the gallbladder, the spleen, the kidneys, small intestine, part of the large intestine, so a lot of major organs. And how well the vagus nerve functions is a strong determinant of your overall health. That's why it's so important. And its dysfunction is associated with disease in general. Now, there was an old way of thinking of the nerves, and it was previously believed that nerves had a basic job to quickly transmit signals from one area to another. But now we're learned that the messages and signals transported by the vagus nerve are vaster and more important than ever thought before. In fact, there's a direct link to many parts of the body, and one of the major links is between your brain and your gut, or the intestines, also known as the microbiome. So the vagus nerve is the single most important communication pathway regarding digestion, nutrient status, the population of bacteria, viruses, yeast, parasites, worms that we live in our digestive tract. Viruses may also actually not be viruses, but maybe something called exomes, which have been kind of misidentified as viruses that live in our body. And the balance between the two branches of the nervous system help maintain our digestion, the bacteria there, and overall health. But if one system is overactive, the other system becomes underactive and loses function. And the chronic imbalances will lead to disease and dysfunction in the body. So basically, one system becomes overactive, the other system starts to less function. And when, for instance, the main imbalance that occurs when stress occurs too long, this basically leads to a parasympathetic nervous system dysfunction. And when the blood flow and function are focused on the parasympathetic branch, which means the blood flow to the parasympathetic branch will be limited, the function will decrease and we get stuck in this. So one way to understand this is that when we get stuck in the stress mode, we start to burn out the body. In the parasympathetic nervous system, we don't recover. And one way of understanding this is when we get stuck in this the sympathetic mode, the stress mode, it burns out the body. And how long it takes you to get sick when you're in stress mode has to do with the strength of your body. In macrobiotic healing, I call it the constitution. In my IDX diagnosis, traditionally they called it by different names. For instance, in China they call it the Jing, and in India they call it the Ojas. And this is basically the inherent strength you're born with and weaknesses, and if you're born strong, then you can take more stresses being in the stress mode. But if you have weakness in your constitution, then basically you get sick sooner when you're in the stress mode. So the opposite is also true. If the parasympathetic nervous system is sluggish, is overactive, then what happens, it will make your ability to deal with potential stressors that create survival in the world. And what happens when the period of time when you're in the stress mode for a long period of time, the body will start to get weakened, and even the parasympathetic nervous system will start to malfunction once the sympathetic branch is burnt out. Now, today's world, there's an imbalance of both branches through stress and pressure. Physical stressors, one of the things that one of the stress pioneers was Hans Selye. He's the person who coined the name stress. And he and other pioneers in bodywork like Ida Rolf discovered that physical and mental stress and emotional stress is seen as the same by the body. So there's no difference in physical, emotional, and mental stresses. Usually when we think of stress, we think of emotional stresses. But there's many, many other stressors besides emotional stressors. So there's diet stresses when your diet's not correct. There's lifestyle stresses when your lifestyle is not correct. There's environmental stresses when we live in polluted environments. Places like New York City, Los Angeles, Wuhan, and northern Italy are some of the most polluted places on earth. So these are toxic stresses will knock down the body. And then when the body's under constant stress, the body produces high levels of inflammation. Inflammation has a healing aspect, and it's not a bad thing. But when it becomes chronic, then it can cause problems in the body. And especially if the body doesn't have time to recover and rest. So then it seems to be that people are breaking down more easily than we are, and we also are getting diseases that people never used to get before. It appears like autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, multiple sclerosis, lupus, and many other kinds of conditions, multiple sclerosis. All types of cancer and heart disease are being diagnosed, also with greater rates of obesity, diabetes at alarming rates. And people's digestion seems to be getting worse, as we know by the growth of the sales of the pharmaceutical acid-blocking drugs, whether it be over-the-counter or not. So given the opportunity to recover, the body can basically recover from these illnesses. and perform the tasks that our cells were meant to perform, allowing us to overcome many of these conditions. But there's so many stresses coming from these various areas that we are under constant stress, a different kind of stress than traditional people. So diets, we'll talk about some of the solutions next time, but for instance, both modern diets and many natural diets, especially experimental natural diets, like certain kinds of diets people never ate before, like traditionally people never ate vegan diets around the world. So this is experimental diet, and depending on how people do this, it could cause imbalances and stress. Other diets, like the modern diet, which has a lot of toxic ingredients, too much sugars and processed foods and junk foods, put the body under stress. Lifestyle practices where people don't sleep enough, or they exercise too much, or they don't exercise enough. Environmental stresses, toxic environments in the home, in the environment we live in the area we live in, demands that are put on us to do things. The demands that are put on us to do things create stress, toxicity, toxic emotions that we're exposed to, or that experience from other people, whether it be work or relationships, problems with sleep, not enough sleep usually, irregularity, light, electromagnetic fields such as 5G and cell phones too close to the body. These are known, although these are poo-pooed by the media, I think for commercial reasons, that they're not really harmful. There's quite a bit of evidence that they are harmful and put the body in stress. And of course, mental and internal stress, just mental, emotional stress. And doctors and medicine can't cure stress. There's no drug to cure stress or toxicity in the environment. There's no drug to cure toxicity in our food, or a lack of nutrition, or a nutritionally deficient diet. These are things that we have to do by self-care and learning to do. Now, the vagus nerve, and we'll talk about this in the next class. Now, why it's called the vagus nerve is because vagus means wandering, or rambling, or strolling, and to less extent, uncertain and vague. So the vagus nerve is the wanderer. It wanders throughout the body, and it basically regulates the function of the autonomic nervous system, including the beating of your heart, the blinking of your eyelids, the breath rate and depth, detoxification of the liver and kidney, their functions. Digestion in the digestive tract is regulated by the vagus nerve. Opening and closing of sweat glands. Sexual arousal is connected to the vagus nerve. And basically, the vagus nerve is connected to the brain by nerve pathways. And there's two types of nerve pathways. Some nerve pathways is sending signals from the brain out to the body, and the other nerve pathways is sending signals from the body to the brain. And the information going to the brain is called afferent information. And sending out information is called efferent. They're actually called afferent neurons that basically go from the body to the brain and through the pathways of the nerve pathways. And the efferent neurons send out information basically from the brain to the body. And the vagus nerve is basically sending information from the body to the brain. That's the function of the vagus nerve. 80% of the information is from the body to the brain that the vagus nerve communicates. 20% is a signal from the brain to the body for specific functions in the body. So this is basically, this signaling has to be correct, and the vagus nerve has to work, plays a big role, especially in activating the parasympathetic nervous system and communicating what needs to be done by the brain to send the signal to the organs. And basically, one of the vagus nerve's main function is to basically moderate inflammation. And if inflammation is chronic, inflammation is healthy as a response to certain circumstances that are short. And basically, one of the wide-ranging effects of chronic inflammation is diseases like Alzheimer's and arthritis and asthma, and this can be partly related to things like a vagus nerve malfunction to a large extent. Cancer, Crohn's disease, diabetes, heart and cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, ulcerative and many conditions that end with the suffix itis. Itis means inflammation. So when you see the medical term itis after that. And the vagus nerve, of course, runs through the body, going through the neck. To say briefly, you could look at a chart of this later, but since this is kind of a short lecture, I'll say it briefly. It runs through the neck, connects to the heart and the lungs, the liver, pancreas, goes into basically all the way into the colon. And if you see a chart of this, this is amazing to look at how it works through the body. Now, the vagus nerve does several things. To finish up, I'll just talk a little bit about the vagus nerve, and maybe during the question and answer period, depending on your questions, I'll talk a little bit more about the vagus nerve. But the vagus nerve does things like sensing the skin of the ear. So that's why ear acupuncture, either with needles or with balls, can stimulate the vagus nerve. It allows food to be swallowed. It basically manages your airway and vocal cords, so that when people have a raspy voice, often it indicates some problem with the vagus nerve. Maintains your blood pressure to a large extent with other organs. And it controls detoxification of the body through many functions. It functions the liver. It also, the vagus nerve malfunction is related to the development of gallstones, because when the vagus nerve is functioning well, your body releases, the gallbladder releases bile to digest fat. One of the major reasons of gallbladder stones is eating a low-fat, extremely low-fat diet, too. The vagus nerve manages hunger and satiety, being satisfied with your food. So if there's a malfunction, you might want to eat more than you need. It manages your blood sugar and insulin levels, and it helps your body process insulin. In addition, of course, the vagus nerve plays a role in managing the release of digestive enzymes, so digestive function. Also, and this does this through the pancreas, which produces the digestive enzymes. It manages the gut function, the immune function, and also manages inflammation in your gut. So it has many of these qualities. It also relays information from the microbiome. And if we have time in the question and answer period, if we don't, I'll go over this next month.